Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry is the culty church that I joined, and in my third-year internship, I received a prophetic word from Sean Bowles saying that God was giving me to my ex-husband who ended up being abusive. Here's where we left off. We just got married, and he is already isolating me. He is telling me that I am not allowed to go out to eat with my dad anymore. He is being emotionally and verbally abusive, and he is also lunging at me and acting like he's going to hit me, but he has not actually hit me yet. He's using religion against me to try to manipulate me into doing whatever he says and to gain a lot of control over me and our relationship. And one thing I didn't mention in the last video too is he would use that Bible verse that said, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger." So like I said, I had fibromyalgia during this time and my pain was greatly affected by my sleep. So one thing that he would do would be to not let me sleep. He would pick fights with me before we would go to bed, and then if I tried to sleep and tell him, "Can we please talk about this in the morning?" he would say, "No, the Bible says that we are not allowed to let the sun go down on our anger." And I genuinely believe that this was a direct way that he was trying to cause me physical pain. And full transparency, guys, I have told this story before on the Did I Marry a Psychopath series. Now, when I told that story and did that series, a lot of people were asking for a full story time about Bethel, and that is what this series was. But obviously a lot of you have been asking about where my deconstruction comes in and how did I walk away from this cult and just what do I believe now, and a lot of that has to do with Ted. So since I've gained a lot of new followers and viewers, I want to finish telling the story. If you are wanting a more detailed storytelling, you can go watch the Did I Marry a Psychopath series, but I will cover all of the main stuff here, and there might even be additional details too. And if you know me from the Something Was Wrong podcast, I have learned more information since I did that podcast, so stay tuned because there is some other crazy stuff that came out later. And also, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and obviously this is a topic that is very close to my heart. It is honestly my entire purpose of sharing my story. So with every, I'm gonna cry. Okay, with every DM that I get of people saying that they have been through this or they are currently going through this, I'm just gonna keep telling the story, and you know, if you guys want to swipe through, that's totally fine, but as long as it is still reaching people, I'm going to keep telling my story. Now, a lot of you guys have asked me, what did my family think of Ted? Okay, so my family, I thought that they liked him at the time. In hindsight, since we got divorced, they have told me that they thought that he was weird and that they were not the biggest fan of him. But nobody was telling me this at the time, and I don't fault them because they did not know that anything bad was going on. So, you know, I'm telling you guys all about these red flags and the abuse that I was suffering. I purposefully hid this from them very skillfully, okay? So they did not see any warning signs really because I was actively trying to hide all of them from them because I was trying to protect Ted. I was trying to protect my marriage, which is a very big deal in these circles. As far as what my parents thought, some of you guys have asked, what did your parents think about the cult in general and what did they think about Ted and giving permission for you guys to get married? Honestly, my parents just wanted me to be happy, and since I'd been in such a dark place previously, they were happy that I was happy, and they were not really into these sorts of circles. All they knew is that I was being a Christian missionary, but they didn't know about some of the crazier beliefs. And like, they did know that it was about signs and wonders and stuff, but to them they're like, well, it is in the Bible, you know, so it was not their jam of spirituality, but they were okay with me going that way as long as I still love Jesus. And as far as giving permission to Ted, at the end of the day, my dad has always respected what I want. And I had told my dad, I want this, and I feel like it's from God, and I want to do this. So my dad was not going to ruin the proposal for me or say, you know, you can't do this, because he did recognize that I was a grown adult at the time. Grown adult, I'm like 20 years old, but I was an adult and I could legally make my own decisions. So he just, you know, went with what I asked him to do. And if you were following me on social media at the time, I was posting pictures like this with captions that said, you know, weekend getaway with my amazing husband. Okay, literally, I was on this trip because we were on the verge of divorce. We were only 6 months into marriage, and we were at such a breaking point because of the abuse, because of my illness, and just the harsh words that he would say to me, and me having a hard time getting past them. You know, because it's like, how am I supposed to believe that this guy loves me when he is calling me all of these very horrible names on a daily or weekly basis? But after he would do these things, he would always get me stuff like this. So when he got me stuff like this, it actually made me feel worse because I knew the tropes. I knew that it was very stereotypical for abusers to get people teddy bears and chocolates after they were abusive. I had seen that modeled in TV shows and movies. So when he would do this, I would tell him, please don't do this. It genuinely makes me feel worse. Like, it makes me feel like maybe this is an abusive situation. And he was like, well, I just want to show you how much I love you. So this was very common, lots of like love bombing afterward. And I think one thing that I'm not being super clear on, not to excuse any of his actions, okay, but he was still the same person as far as loving me loud. So behind closed doors, he is saying the most awful things to me, ripping blankets off of me so I can't sleep, and doing all of those sorts of things. But he would also shower me with praise publicly, always posting about how I was his dream, the biggest gift from God in the entire world. And he would also take me on a bunch of dates and make me feel very special. So I felt like I was living with two different people. I was living with the person who courted me back in Pennsylvania, and then I was living with this very dark presence as well. So at this point, he had not been physically abusive yet, but finally there was one time where we were arguing and he ended up taking a jacket and he started to hit me with this jacket. And when I later said, you know, you hit me, he said, I didn't hit you, the jacket hit you. So I'm just living in this very warped world of like, he's flirting with being physical, but he, in my mind, is not leaving bruises. He is not punching me. And it's enough to where I can hide what is going on in my life. So during that same argument, he ended up, and trigger warning, okay, he ended up pinning me down on the bed and screaming in my face and spitting in my face. And, you know, I would tell him, this feels like abuse. And I know that that sounds so stupid, guys, but if you have ever been in an abusive relationship, you know, like the mental gymnastics and hoops that you go through, especially if it doesn't look textbook. Like, I didn't have a black eye. All I knew is that my wrist kind of hurt because he had pinned me down and he really, really scared me. So yeah, it was a very, very confusing time. And after this fight, we ended up calling these spiritual leaders in our life, and they had some very interesting advice, which I will explain in the next part. So follow for the next part.